I had always been a man who believed respect was like a pension. You earned it, you vested, and in the twilight of your life it paid out. Not all at once, but in slow, regular increments until the day you clocked out for good. For 69 years, I paid in. Long nights at the smelter. Weekends I could have spent with a fishing rod, but spent instead with a wrench in my hand. Overtime hours traded for braces on Evan's crooked teeth and later, for his down payment. My signature had always meant something, whether it was on a mortgage, a report card, or the back of a permission slip. I believed, stubbornly, that respect and trust, once bought with sweat, did not depreciate. I believed this up until 7:42 p.m. on a Thursday in late January, when Lena stood in my kitchen with her hands folded over a glass of white wine and said, with surgical precision, "He's forgetful. We should take guardianship so his pension is safe. Subscribe to help one more person spot the red flags in time." The sound in the kitchen went flat. The tick of the refrigerator compressor, the hollow hum of the under-cabinet lights, Lena's words, everything layered in a strange, distant silence, as if I'd submerged beneath a thick layer of ice. She was still beautiful, Lena, in the way that made some people immediately trust her. Those soft, thoughtful eyes, the confidence in her posture, the way her business casual blouse never wrinkled even after a 10-hour day at the hospital. She tapped her spoon on the granite edge, never looking directly at me, as if this was a topic like any other. Weather, traffic, the parking lot at the Safeway. Evan sat across from her, both hands cradling a mug of decaffeinated. His stare was fixed on the dark surface, swirling it clockwise, as if hoping the pattern would reveal the right thing to say. His silence wasn't indifference. It was the sound of a grown son calculating the tensile strength of the bridge between us, and discovering maybe it wasn't load-bearing after all. I remembered then the nights I'd spent standing behind him in the garage, teaching him to torque down a cylinder head, my hands gentle on his knuckles, my voice quiet but insistent. Don't force it. Let the tool do the work. I'd taught him that the right amount of pressure could be the difference between fixing something and breaking it forever. Evan wouldn't meet my gaze. Lena filled the space for him. It's just that you've been, well, slipping up. Remember when you left the stove on? She said, keeping her tone light, as if she were mentioning my habit of double salting the soup. And you got that letter from the insurance company about the bank transfer mix-up. These things accumulate, Ray. She said my name the way a surgeon says scalpel, firm, transactional, necessary. The mug in my hand was heavy, a ceramic thing I'd bought in Colorado with Maggie 20 years ago. It had a chip in the handle, the place where her thumb used to rest. I gripped it tighter, let the heat work its way up my palm, but the warmth felt unearned, not my own. My hands went cold anyway. Guardianship, I repeated, careful to keep my voice even. In my father's day, they would have called it something else. Putting a man out to pasture, taking his keys, marching him to a recliner, and pointing him at a window until the sky turned dark. That's what you're after? Lena gave me the smile she probably reserved for unruly patients. It's about protecting you. Your pension is a target now, Ray. There are people who... I can handle my own mail, I said, louder than I meant to. Evan finally looked up. I saw in his eyes not the boy I'd taught to change a tire, but a man who had outgrown his father's tools. He cleared his throat. Dad, nobody's saying you can't. It's just... Well, Lena's seen a lot of cases at work. Families get torn up when people wait too long. We just want to get ahead of it, that's all. It stung, hearing my son's side with a bureaucracy I'd spent a lifetime sidestepping. For years, the only thing that got me through the graveyard shift was the certainty that I was building something for him. Brick by brick, dollar by dollar. All the things my own father couldn't give me because he died at 53, with nothing to his name but a single suit and an uncashed Social Security check. I'd vowed never to let my family feel that kind of uncertainty, and now they wanted to take the reins from me. My whole body tensed, a slow coiling up of old tendons and pride. I fixed my gaze on Lena. So you want to run my life for me? Take the checkbook, put me on an allowance, stick a sticky note on the fridge so I don't forget my own goddamn address. She didn't flinch. Not run, Ray. Support. It's a legal thing. You'd hardly notice the difference day to day. And you'd be protected from myself? I finished, smiling without humor. Evan shook his head, but his lips pressed together in the way Maggie's used to when she was trying to keep from crying. I wanted to shout, to pound the table, to upend the mugs and wine glasses, to remind them whose house this was and who had paid for it in years of calloused hands and 12-hour shifts. But that wasn't my way. My father had taught me to suffer indignities quietly, to be the last man to lose his temper, as he put it. So I held my tongue, let the cold creep further into my hands, and said nothing as Lena went on about legal options and how she'd already flagged the topic with an elder law attorney who could expedite things if we moved quickly. The meeting lasted exactly 43 minutes. When they left, Lena's wine glass was half full and sweating, leaving a ring on the counter. Evan patted my shoulder, gentle, almost apologetic. He promised to call tomorrow. The door closed behind them, but the words lingered, echoing through the kitchen like the ring from a hammer on steel. I sat at the table for a long time after, unmoving, the chipped mug cooling against my palm. I couldn't tell if I was shivering from the winter draft leaking in around the window, or from something colder that had burrowed in deeper and would not be leaving anytime soon. They say a man can get used to anything, given enough time, but I had never thought I'd need to get used to being made small by my own son and the woman he loved. I finished the coffee in one bitter swallow, rinsed the mug, and set it carefully on the drying rack. Then I turned off the kitchen light and stood for a moment in the darkness, waiting for the warmth of the house to return, if it ever would. The night after Lena dropped her spoonful of poison in my kitchen, I barely slept. I turned on the television, then off again. The silence stretched, brittle and charged. I walked the length of the hall, counting the steps as if that would anchor me, but the house had never felt so large or so indifferent to my presence. I stopped at the photograph of Maggie in the living room, her face a little blurred from years of dust and sunlight, and wondered what she'd make of all this. I remembered the first time she let me hold her hand, back in '77, at a bowling alley in Albuquerque, our hands both slick from the greasy plastic of the rented shoes. She'd laughed, and even then, I knew the sound of her laughter was something I could spend a whole lifetime paying for. I married her on a Tuesday, in a courthouse with no air conditioning and a judge who looked half asleep. After, we split a hot dog outside on the curb, and Maggie said, "We'll get the good stuff later, Ray." And we did. But the good stuff cost. Nobody tells you that at the wedding. For 39 years, I worked the night shift at I&M, first as a line runner, then as a crew chief when the old man retired and nobody else wanted the grief. The plant was built for 100 men but ran on 30, so my job was to stretch ourselves thinner each year, make do with duct tape and borrowed time. My lungs learned to filter the metallic taste of the air. I could feel in my bones when the old furnace was about to seize up, just by the way the pressure valve ticked. They told me I had intuition for machinery, but it was just familiarity. The kind of relationship you get when two things are stuck together for half a century. I worked weekends. I missed every single one of Evan's Little League games, which he never let me forget, even after he lost interest in baseball. I'd bring home day-old donuts and try to make up for it with small gifts. A magazine, a trick puzzle box, a set of pro paintbrushes because he once mentioned he liked art. The guilt never went away, but the bills didn't either. Then there was the year the benefits changed, and I had to pick up double shifts to keep Maggie's infusions covered. She'd sit in the blue recliner, her legs wrapped in a blanket, pretending to watch TV but really just napping. The chemo didn't make her lose her hair, just turned it the color of a pigeon's feather and left her so tired she sometimes didn't know which day it was. The only time she got mad was when I tried to fix her problems for her. "Let me have my dignity," she'd say. "You worry about keeping the roof from leaking. I'll handle the rest." When she died, the only thing left in her nightstand was a watch I gave her the first Christmas and a piece of paper that said, "Don't forget to water the African violets." After the funeral, I sold the '78 Chevy pickup, my last big purchase, the one I'd kept running with the stubbornness that should have been spent on better things. I handed Evan the money for his down payment, no questions asked. He promised to come over every Sunday for dinner. He tried, at first. Then came the years of drifting. I kept working because I didn't know how to stop, even after the plant closed. The first year of retirement was a loop of empty days, filling the time with repairs and walks around the block, calling Evan every couple of days just to ask about the weather or if the brakes on his Accord were still making that noise. When the first of the grandkids was born, Mason, I thought maybe things would come back together, the way they do in books or at the end of a long movie. But Mason was sickly, always at the pediatrician, then the ER, then specialist appointments 2 hours away. The kid had a whistle to his lungs that reminded me of the pressure valves at the plant, a warning sign I could never quite fix. I'd sit in the waiting room while Lena and Evan argued with the billing desk, and I'd try to make Mason laugh with stupid faces or coin tricks. Sometimes it worked. I began to measure my life in the waiting for test results, waiting for updates, waiting for a new medication to finally work. I got good at hospital routines, the best vending machines, the chairs that didn't cut off your circulation, which nurses had the lightest touch with the IVs. I bought coffee for the night shift nurses and remembered all their names, because someone should. Once, at 3 a.m, Lena found me sitting cross-legged on the tile in the PICU hallway, a can of Pepsi in one hand and the other pressed to my eyes. She sat beside me, shoulder to shoulder, and said, "I know this isn't what you pictured." She said it kindly, and I believed her. What I didn't say then, but feel now with a kind of animal certainty, is that life isn't about what you picture. It's about what you're willing to pay. You rack up these invisible charges, missed birthdays, overnight shifts, the silent worry you keep to yourself so nobody else has to carry it. You assume that someday someone will notice, that maybe you'll be allowed to rest, debt-free, or at least forgiven for your absences. But what nobody warns you about is that love is the bill you pay without a receipt. You settle up over and over until one day your balance turns up negative and you owe more than you thought possible. Now, Lena's words ran a loop in my head. He's forgetful. We should take guardianship so his pension is safe. The sum total of my life's work, a set of numbers that, apparently, needed safeguarding from my own incompetence. The house creaked. The wind made the windows rattle a little, and I noticed for the first time that a section of caulking above the sill had pulled away, leaving a thin gap to the outside. I made a note to fix it in the morning. I sat down at the kitchen table again, opened the drawer where Maggie used to keep her recipe cards, and thumbed through them, though I knew every single one by heart. On a blue index card, in her round, even handwriting, she'd written, "Lasagna, Ray's favorite." The instructions were direct, no nonsense, with little addenda in the margins. Don't skimp on cheese or he'll notice. I touched my finger to the indentation where she'd pressed too hard with the pen. That was what I remembered about love, more than anything. Not the big gestures, but the details. How she remembered what I liked. How she found ways to keep things together, even when everything else was falling apart. Now I looked at my life and saw not a sum, but a subtraction. I tried to picture myself as Lena saw me, a fragile old man, ill-equipped to manage his own affairs, one bad decision away from burning down the house or signing away the last of my dignity. I tried to summon a righteous anger, but what came instead was a slow, persistent ache. Maybe I was losing it. Maybe I wasn't. What bothered me wasn't the risk. It was the certainty that my son and his wife had already made up their minds. Somewhere along the way, all the things I'd built became reasons to strip me of the ability to choose for myself. They'd tally the mistakes, but none of the repairs. In the ledger of family, only the deficits seemed to count. It was a clever trick, how love turns into leverage. I read through the recipe cards, one by one, until my vision went blurry. I didn't know if I was angry at Lena, or at myself, or at the way time rewrites even the truest intentions. But I knew I wasn't ready to hand over the checkbook. Not yet. Not for all the legalese in the world. I set the cards back in order, straightened them so the corners aligned. The work of a man who still believed in the virtue of neatness, even when the rest of the world stopped caring. Outside, the wind picked up, and I thought about the caulking, the way the cold would leak through if I let it. Maybe this was the year I finally learned how to patch things properly, instead of just covering up the cracks. The next morning I woke up early, made coffee, and sat at the table as the sun angled in across the backyard. The grass was brown and slick, the flag in the neighbor's yard barely moving. I had a list of things to fix: furnace filter, garage door, maybe the battery and the fire alarm. But first, I needed to figure out how to protect the only thing that was really mine: the right to make my own mistakes. I'd always prided myself on how little paper it took to run my life. Even after Maggie died, I kept the mail in neat little piles. Bills to the left, junk to the right, and anything with handwriting in the center, for reading when I had the time and the quiet to appreciate it. She used to say I was old school about it, but I just liked the clarity. No surprises, no mess. So when I found the pamphlet on the hall table, it was as if someone had slipped a dead rat among the linens. The cover was a garish blue, the title a punchline: How to Become a Guardian, Fast Track Guide. 3 yellow sticky notes bloomed from its edges, each labeled in Lena's immaculate all caps: SSAINCOMEACCESSFORM 6A. It was not the kind of thing you left out by accident. I could see Lena, standing in this very hallway, smoothing the cover flat with her palm, sure that the next time I left for the mailbox, I'd notice it. It was meant as a kindness, probably, a breadcrumb trail so that if I couldn't follow the conversation from last night, I could retrace the steps with my own eyes. But all I saw was a roadmap to my obsolescence, one tab at a time. I picked it up. The weight was nothing, but the pages bristled with implication. The first section was highlighted in neon yellow. Guardianship is a legal process intended to support individuals who may be at risk of self-harm or financial exploitation. The next page promised seamless transfer of income and benefits to a qualified representative, as if my years of pay stubs and perfect credit could be redirected by a line on a form. I turned to the page marked SSA. There, in black and white, it explained how to request a change of payee for Social Security, how to fill out Form 6A, how to prove functional incapacity. It listed symptoms: missed appointments, repeated financial errors, difficulty understanding the consequences of one's choices. I laughed out loud. Not a real laugh, more like the dry sound a furnace makes before it catches. In my entire life, I had missed exactly 3 appointments. One because Evan broke his arm on a playground, one because Maggie's mother slipped on ice, and one because my car blew a water pump at 2 in the morning and I had to walk home. As for financial errors, my accounts had always balanced, to the penny. I put the pamphlet down, then picked it up again, just to feel the crispness of the paper beneath my thumb. I pressed, hard, until the pages bent. I thought about Lena's confidence, the way she'd looked at me not with pity, but with expectation, waiting for me to catch up to her reality. Maybe this was how it went for everyone. Maybe you worked your life to a point, and then the world decided it was time to start subtracting. I wondered how my own father would have handled it, whether he'd have burned the pamphlet or simply ignored it until the decision was made without him. Probably the latter. He was a master at losing things by accident. But my mind was clear. The fog, if there was any, was in the chest, not the brain. I felt sharp, present, more alive than I had in months. I looked around the hallway, at the patched paint where the handrail used to be, at the row of mismatched frames Maggie never let me straighten, and realized I wasn't angry so much as determined. If Lena and Evan wanted a war, they'd have it, but it would be on my terms. I opened the junk drawer, found a black marker, and crossed out the title. Underneath, I wrote in block letters, "Not yet." Then I set the pamphlet upright, like a little flag, for the next time Evan came to visit. If they were going to fight me for my freedom, the least I could do was let them know I was ready. In the time it took for Lena's pamphlet to glare at me from the hall table to the time I called Dr. Park's office, I developed a new theory. The modern world didn't care much for pride, but it cared a great deal for paperwork. If I wanted to hang on to my life, my choices, my money, my name on the mailbox, I needed to gather my credentials like a man prepping for an audit. So I stopped talking. If Lena or Evan called, I let it go to voicemail. If a neighbor waved, I nodded but kept my hands buried in the toolbox, or my eyes on the shrubs that needed trimming. Instead, I assembled evidence. Old pay stubs, insurance summaries, tax forms I'd never thrown away. I paged through the 3-ring binder where I kept every warranty and receipt, every pink slip and purchase agreement since 1978. If my life was on trial, I would build the most airtight case possible. On Monday morning, I called Dr. Park's office and told them I needed an urgent appointment. The scheduler, a woman with the gravelly voice of a lifelong smoker, said the first available was Tuesday at 10:10 a.m. "Is this a follow-up or a new concern, Mr. Cole?" she asked. "Call it capacity evaluation," I said. "I'd like it on the record." The pause on her end was brief, professional. "Understood, Mr. Cole. Please bring a list of current medications and any recent labs." At 9:40 Tuesday, I shaved twice, put on my best flannel shirt, and left the house early, binder in hand. The office was in a new medical building across from the mall, all glass and concrete and motivational posters about brain health. I sat in the waiting room and watched 2 women in scrubs gossip quietly, their voices just low enough to avoid HIPAA trouble. At 10:13, Dr. Park called me in. She was a small woman, Korean maybe, with perfectly even handwriting and the sort of calm that came from long practice. She shook my hand, eyes sharp but not unkind. "Good morning, Mr. Cole. What brings you in?" I told her the story, beginning with the kitchen ambush, the pamphlet, and the list of supposed offenses Lena and Evan had gathered. I tried not to sound bitter, but maybe it leaked through, because she nodded and said, "You're not the first to come in for this reason. It's becoming more common." She had me sit at the edge of the exam table, and she ran through the standard questions. What year is it? Where are we right now? Recite these 5 words. Draw a clock face showing 10 after 11. Then came the subtraction, the word list, the animal names, and the string of numbers backward and forward. When she finished, she looked up from her clipboard. "You did very well, Mr. Cole. Your Mosier score is 28 out of 30. That's above average for your age group. I felt a bloom of relief, mixed with a sting of something else. Maybe that I even needed to prove it. Can you put it in writing? I asked. She smiled, a real one. Of course. In fact, I'll do it now. She turned to her desk, fingers flying over the keyboard, and within 2 minutes, she had printed a letter on crisp letterhead. Patient demonstrates full capacity to manage finances and medical decisions. No evidence of cognitive impairment noted at this time. She signed it in blue ink, then stamped it with her practice seal. I read the letter twice before sliding it into the binder, right behind the tab marked Life Insurance. For the first time since Lena opened her mouth, I felt the scales tip, just a little, back in my favor. Dr. Park handed me a copy for my records and offered a business card. If you ever need me to speak to family or testify to this, just call the office. You're not alone in this. Sometimes families try to help a little too soon. I thanked her and left. In the car, I sat for a long time, reading and rereading the letter until I could recite it by heart. It was the kind of thing you never imagine needing, but once you have it, you wonder how you ever managed without. At home, I put the binder on the kitchen counter and opened it flat, the letter facing up. I set the black marker beside it, a warning shot across the bow. For the first time in a week, I made lunch with something like an appetite. I microwaved leftover lasagna, set the table for one, and ate it in silence. There was dignity in the act, a reminder that even when the world was shrinking, I could still choose what went on my plate. After I called Evan's voicemail. Hey, it's Dad. Just wanted to let you know I saw Dr. Park. Got her letter if you want to read it. No hard feelings, but I want this settled before it gets out of hand. See you Sunday, if you're still coming for dinner. I hung up and felt the knot in my chest begin, at last, to loosen. Hit subscribe and write one rule you'll follow from now on. When I made the appointment at Samuel Vega's office, I was expecting the usual runaround, forms to fill, waiting rooms to endure, and the sort of professional distance lawyers cultivate to avoid catching whatever panic their clients bring through the door. What I got instead was a man who looked at me like I was the only thing on his agenda that day. It was unsettling, the way he anticipated each of my questions, as if he'd lived this same battle 100 times and already knew where the flanking attacks would come from. Mr. Vega's office was in a brownstone just off the courthouse square, the kind of place that had probably been a bakery or a dentist at one point, judging by the faint sugar scent in the entryway. He shook my hand, firm but not aggressive, and ushered me into a corner room lined with legal texts and black and white photographs of people who I assumed were his family, or maybe his clients. On his desk was a pad of yellow legal paper and a fountain pen. He clicked on and off, more out of habit than necessity. "You're not here to make a will, are you?" he said, sitting down and gesturing for me to do the same. I liked him immediately. "No, sir. I'm here to keep the vultures off my pension." He grinned, the kind of smile that said he'd heard it all before. "You've been reading ahead." "Good. Most people show up here already picked clean." He tapped the pen, then flipped to a fresh page. "Walk me through it." I started with the kitchen showdown, the pamphlet, the appointment with Dr. Park. I slid the letter across the desk. He read it, nodded once, and set it face up beside his own notes. I told him about Lena's background in healthcare administration, her experience with the worst-case scenario, and the sense I got that she was already 3 steps into the process before I even noticed the first one. He took it all in, scribbling short, tight bullet points. Then he set the pen down and folded his hands. "Mr. Cole, what you're dealing with is a form of anticipatory guardianship. Your family wants to make sure you're protected, but they're going about it in a way that puts you on the defensive. If you let them file first, you're reacting. If you act now, you get to set the terms. He opened a folder labeled Intake and slid a stack of forms toward me. We're going to file a preemptive objection with the probate court. It's basically a legal do not resuscitate order for your autonomy. Nobody can initiate a guardianship without notice to you and to this office. It also gives you time to contest any claims before a judge rubber stamps it. I glanced through the forms. It was all there in black and white. Name, date of birth, social security, nature of the objection. For the first time in days, I felt not just heard, but defended. He leaned forward. I'm going to recommend 3 additional steps. First, a letter to the Social Security Administration stating you do not authorize a representative payee change without your direct, in-person consent. Second, we put a password on your pension fund. That way nobody, not even family, can make changes without showing up at the office and giving the secret word. Third, we add a note to your bank accounts to flag any large withdrawals or transfers for in-branch only. No online access for new payees, ever. He spoke in short, punchy phrases, like a football coach running a drill. We'll also update your advance directive and POA. The new document will be springing, which means it only activates if 2 independent physicians certify incapacity, and only then under court oversight. I signed where he pointed. The pen felt heavier with each signature. The gravity of the moment not lost on me. Mr. Cole, I'm going to say something that might sound harsh, he said, gathering the forms into a neat stack. This process will feel like trench warfare. Families always say it's for your benefit. But once the legal machinery starts, it can take years to dig your way out. You did the right thing coming here first. I nodded. What do I do now? He smiled, a little softer this time. Move slow. Speak plain. Keep your phone on voice memo whenever you're in a family meeting. If anyone tries to talk you into something, you want a record. And never, ever sign anything unless I've seen it first. Understood? Understood. He gave me a business card, his cell number scrawled on the back. If they push, call, even on weekends. That's what you're paying for. When I left the office, it was raining, the kind of slow, persistent drizzle that soaks in before you notice. I walked to the car without opening my umbrella, letting the dampness settle on me. It felt earned, in a way, like the ache after a long day's work. At home, I set the binder on the kitchen table, stacked the new letters beside the old ones, and programmed my phone's voice memo shortcut to the home screen. The kitchen felt smaller, but also safer. The next time Lena tried to push, I would be ready. And if Evan needed to talk, he could come to me, man to man, or not at all. I cleaned the kitchen 3 times that morning, not because it needed it, but because I wanted no distractions when the time came. I washed and re-wiped the counter, lined up the coffee mugs like soldiers, checked and rechecked the status light on the coffee maker. By 1:50, I was sitting at the table with my hands folded, the binder in front of me, the phone set precisely between the salt and the pepper. At 1:57, I heard the crunch of Evan's car in the driveway. Lena's SUV was already parked on the street, the front wheels tilted perfectly into the curb. I watched from the window as they approached, Lena leading by a step, and Evan trailing, hands in the pockets of a windbreaker I didn't recognize. They knocked, even though they never used to, and I let them in. "Hi, Dad," Evan said, glancing past me at the table. "Lena," I said, giving her a nod. She smiled, businesslike. They both sat, Lena across from me and Evan to my right, nearer the coffee. She produced a small notebook from her purse and opened it to a page bristling with bullet points. Evan picked at the corner of the tablecloth. I cleared my throat. "Before we start, I'd like to read something." I took out Dr. Park's letter and read it in full, every word, careful to keep my voice steady. When I finished, I slid the letter across to them. Lena read it in a single, efficient motion and handed it back. Evan just stared at it. "I also brought copies of the paperwork," I said. "Letters to the Social Security Administration, my pension office, and the bank, plus the court filing." I set each document on the table in a neat fan. "Everything is accounted for." Lena took a sip of water, then leaned forward. "Ray, nobody is attacking you. We just want to make sure things are safe. If you'd slow down, we could—" "I am slowed down," I said. "I took it very slow. That's why we're here." She tapped her pen on the notepad. "You're overreacting. This is just a precaution." "No," I said. "This is protection." Protection wears paper and looks me in the eye. Evan finally spoke, voice thin. "Dad, we're just worried about you." I looked at him, really looked, and for a moment he was 12 again, sick with strep and unable to swallow, his face puffy and eyes rimmed with fever. I wanted to reach out, to tell him it was okay, but the time for that was past. "If you're worried, you come to me," I said. "I will always answer. I'm not a child, and I'm not your patient. If I need help, I will ask for it." Lena set her pen down and sat back. "I see." It was her final word, the closing of a file. There was no yelling, no tears, just the cold, sharp clarity of facts, like the smell of ozone after a lightning strike. Evan pushed his chair back, but didn't stand. "Can we still come for Sunday dinner?" he asked. I nodded. "As long as you don't bring pamphlets." He laughed, a small, nervous sound, and I found myself laughing too. The world didn't end. Nobody was thrown out. Nobody called names. After they left, I sat for a long time, staring at the papers in front of me, the coffee growing cold in the pot. I felt tired, but not defeated. Maybe I'd lost something, or maybe I'd finally drawn a boundary that could hold. When it got dark, I closed the binder, washed the mugs, and turned off the lights. The kitchen was quiet, exactly as I wanted it. Monday morning arrived with the chill of late winter and a silence that felt almost reverent. At 8:06, my phone lit up with an email from Mr. Vega. "Guardianship intake withdrawn. You will receive formal notice by post. Congratulations, Mr. Cole. You did it." I let the words hang there for a minute, basking in the unlikely warmth of them. I made a cup of coffee, black and unhurried, and sat by the window as the sun broke through over the neighbor's fence. I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt so simply present. 2 hours later, the phone rang. A number I didn't recognize, which usually meant robocall or scam. But this time it was a woman from the SSA office downtown. "Mr. Cole, just confirming that we've placed a notice on your account. No representative payee changes without your physical presence and valid ID." "Thank you," I said, surprised at the catch in my voice. I drove to the bank next. The manager, a man younger than Evan by at least a decade, greeted me by name and shook my hand with both of his. He led me to the glass office near the back and walked me through the new security measures. "We've added the password protection, Mr. Cole. No transactions over $500 without in-branch approval and verbal confirmation." "Do you remember the word you chose?" I did. I said it out loud, twice, and the manager smiled, the kind that reached his eyes. Back home, I stopped at the hardware store and bought a small fire safe, the kind with a combination dial and steel hinges. I set it on the floor of my bedroom closet and loaded it with the binder, the capacity letter, and all the other paperwork Mr. Vega recommended. Then I took the signed letter from Dr. Park and taped a copy of it to the inside of the safe's door, just where I would see it every time I opened it. It wasn't about pride, not anymore. It was about proving, if only to myself, that I was still here, still standing, still in charge of my own story. When I closed the safe and spun the dial, I felt a calm I hadn't known in months. The world would keep spinning, and the people I loved would keep trying to help, or to hurt, or to save me in ways I didn't always understand. But for now, at least, my life was my own, and that was enough. I could have let it go, I suppose, chalked up the last week to overprotective kids and too much spare time. But old habits die hard, and mine was always to put things in writing. If there was going to be a record of these events, I wanted my version to come first. So I sat down at my desk, the same battered oak table where I'd balanced checkbooks, fixed toy trucks, and written every letter to Maggie when she was in the hospital, and started from the top. I wrote to Evan. Not an email, but a real letter, ink and all. I kept it clean and direct. No accusations, no dramatics, just a clear sequence of what happened, when, and why. I started with Lena's comment at the kitchen counter, "He's forgetful," and moved through the neuro appointment with Dr. Park, the test scores, the signed letter. I included the meeting at the bank, the handshake, the safe. I told him I understood why he worried, that I would never hold it against him for wanting to look out for his old man. But I also made it clear. I was not done being myself, not yet. "You are welcome at my table every Sunday at 2, I wrote. "But until we have a family therapist say otherwise, there will be no talk of finances, health care, or legalities at dinner. Just food, and the weather, and your kids if you want to bring them." I read the letter 3 times before folding it into an envelope. My hands shook a little as I wrote his address. I wasn't sure if it was nerves or just age. When I finished, I found myself longing for Maggie's voice. She would have said, "Ray, make tea," and I would have grumbled, but then done it anyway. So I did. I watched the kettle on the stove, the way the water went from stillness to a slow roil, the first wisps of steam curling up like a signal. I poured the tea into her favorite mug, the one with the faded violets, and sat by the window. The sun was lower now, the light slanting in across the table and making the dust motes shimmer in the air. I thought about the week, the fight, the papers, the careful strategies and countermeasures, and realized how much of life is just this, trying to hold on to a little space for yourself, a patch of sunlight, a quiet moment over a mug of something warm. I watched the steam rise, thin and insubstantial, here for a moment, and then gone. That was the lesson, I thought. Everything in life was temporary, but some things, dignity, agency, the right to make your own mistakes, were worth defending, even if only for a little while longer. I sipped the tea and let the silence settle around me, hoping that, somewhere, Maggie was watching and understood. Justice, as I'd come to understand it, was not a matter of balance or retribution. It was the letter on Dr. Park's stationery, the dry language of a court's withdrawal notice, the way the bank manager shook my hand and called me Mr. Cole like I still mattered. It was the right to sign your own name on the dotted line and to decide, for yourself, when or if you needed someone to do it for you. It was sitting at the kitchen table, binder open and everything in its proper place, knowing that no one could take it away without your say-so. Evan came for Sunday dinner, alone this time. He brought a rotisserie chicken from the grocery and a pie from the bakery. We ate in the living room, plates balanced on our knees, and talked about nothing much, old movies, the state of the roads, the neighbors and their perpetual house projects. Neither of us mentioned the week before, or what might come next. After he left, I cleaned up, poured myself another cup of coffee, and watched the late sun flicker through the backyard trees. I was still the man who sometimes lost his glasses, who salted the pasta with a heavy hand, who could be stubborn and small and proud. But I was also a man who had held the line, if only for a while. The future was uncertain, Maybe it always had been. But I had my own keys, my own signature, and a safe full of evidence that I was not done yet. The pamphlet sat where I'd left it, its title still blacked out, and my message still visible beneath. Not yet. I smiled, just a little, and let the day end on my terms. If any of this rings true, subscribe and leave one sentence, the boundary you'll set this week.